Chapter 1, That Smell. The cold metal trembled in his hands, as if afraid of what it hid beneath. The scent of damp earth mingled with the aroma of old boards and something else, something usually only smelled at night, on farms long abandoned. At that moment, Elias Marlowe thought for the first time that the pump for their septic tank could have been found anywhere, except here. "Raise it higher," his wife, Joan, whispered, clutching the lantern so tightly her knuckles turned white. The lid cracked raggedly, as if resisting. Light cut through the darkness for a second, and everything changed. Elias felt a chill run down his spine, and something tightened in his chest. Not from the sight. From the silence. A silence so thick it felt as if the very air itself had flinched. "Joan, there's someone there." "What do you mean, there is?" "I mean, was." She took a step back. Then another. The flashlight trembled in her hands, snatching from the darkness the merest fragments of a silhouette, barely discernible, but too human to pretend to be a branch or a shadow. Elias inhaled, and smelled the scent that would wake him in the middle of the night for weeks. Not pungent. Not sharp. Just wrong. The scent that comes from somewhere that's long since ceased to belong. He tried to look away, but his gaze kept returning, as if afraid of missing an important detail. Although what normal person wants to see something like that? His wife exhaled. "Oh, my God. Elias, it's..." Her voice broke. No. He only whispered quietly. "Call the sheriff. Now." And it was at that moment, as the investigator would later say, that the story began to breathe on its own. Do you think the truth rises to the surface? Sometimes it sinks deeper than the person. And today we'll tell the story of someone who disappeared on the very night he was supposed to tell the truth. Chapter 2, Alberta doesn't take kindly to strangers. Mornings in Alberta had begun the same way for years. The ringing of a grocery store bell, the smell of freshly roasted coffee from a small coffee shop at the intersection, and the slow, almost lazy hum of tractors, whose sound residents knew better than their neighbors. The town was small, tenacious, like an old dog. It disliked outsiders, but protected its own to the bitter end. True, it only protected those it knew. And that's precisely why the story of Sam, the man found in the septic tank, cut through the town like a knife through the dense fabric of silence. The first rumors spread faster than newspapers. At Jack's, a man in a plaid shirt told the bartender. "Elias saw a damn ghost." "I'm sure of it." The bartender sighed, wiped the counter, and replied lazily, "Ghosts don't smell like that, Harry." Even those who didn't want to discuss the find still cast anxious glances at the old road leading to the abandoned farm. A road no one used anymore unless absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, at the local hardware store, the saleswoman, Mrs. Carroll, quietly whispered to a customer, "This place was bad to begin with. Its previous owner, well..." And then she clucked her lips, as if she'd said too much. That's how it is in small towns. They know everything, but they tell you only in measured doses, depending on who asks and why. But the strangest thing was, no one remembered anyone resembling the man found. Not the farmers. Not the truck drivers who passed through town. Not even the regulars at the bar, who could tell who was coming by the way they walked. "A stranger," said Sheriff Stanley McCord, removing his hat and looking around the farm. And Alberta never took kindly to strangers. He spoke sharply, but his eyes betrayed anxiety. They held a single thought: if the victim is a stranger, then who's to say the perpetrator is one of our own? The sheriff remembered the old farm. It stood on the outskirts, like a forgotten toy. People had once lived here, laughed, worked, and argued. Then they all left. Some said they moved, others whispered they couldn't take it anymore. And the true reason had long since vanished in the winds blowing between the rotted walls. The farm had been empty for decades, but, as happens with empty houses, it had a life of its own. The doors creaked as if complaining. The roof sighed in the wind. And the basement, nobody dared open the basement at night. People sensed it, this was a bad place. But now, after the discovery, it wasn't just bad, it was dangerous. And yet there was something else. Something McCord didn't say out loud. Too subtle an evil doesn't just happen by accident. He didn't yet know that this was only the beginning. The city would have to be shaken further before its residents saw the truth they'd been avoiding for years. They feared strangers. But the real threat had probably been hanging around for a long time, greeting them, buying them bread, and bothering no one. Chapter 3: The Men Without a Past. In Sheriff McCord's office, the lamp hummed as if it, too, was tired of the difficult questions. The items found next to the body lay on the desk: a tattered shirt without a tag, a belt that could have been bought anywhere, and old shoes without a single identifying mark. Too few to fold a man. Too many to dismiss him as a nobody. McCord stared at the shoes as if they should tell him everything. Size 40, he said aloud. So, not a teenager. But not a big man either. The laces are tied neatly, almost meticulously. The insole is dented on the right side. Deputy Clyde chuckled. Chief, are you talking to the shoes again? At least they're more honest than the locals, McCord muttered. And that made sense. No one in town could remember anyone even remotely resembling Sam. There were no visitors, no relatives searching, not even a casual mention. It was as if he appeared out of thin air. And vanished into thin air. Besides his clothing, the forensic experts tried to reconstruct the deceased's habits. Look, said the detail expert, pointing to his shirt sleeves. The fabric is worn specifically at the cuffs. That means he rolled them up more often. He liked to work with his hands. A farmer? McCord asked. Or a mechanic? Or someone who wasn't afraid of dirty work? But the expert hesitated. It's all strange here. The man is used to hard work, but his boots aren't that worn. As if he, didn't have time to live out them. The word hung in the air. Not yet. And the town had already begun to build legends. In Jack's, the old men whispered to each other. Maybe he was a fugitive. Who would he be running from? With a face like that, you wouldn't recognize him in any mirror. In our town, even mirrors remember people. The laughter in the bar was forced. Sam had become a topic everyone wanted to talk about, but only without seeming too interested. As if being interested in the case automatically made you suspicious. And yet, someone noticed something important. A few days after Marlowe's discovery, that same Elias reported a strange detail. A week earlier, he had seen a light on the farm. Dim, yellow, as if the lamp had been held low, shaded with a hand. Why didn't you tell me right away? The sheriff asked. Elias shrugged. I thought it was teenagers sneaking around. They're either smashing banks or smoking cigarettes there. Who's going to clean it up? That was true. But there was something else to it. A person always sees what they want to see, until the truth gets too close. The forensic experts came up with a short, almost offensively empty profile. A man of average height, a hard worker, not inclined to expensive things, used to doing everything himself. And that's all. A profile that would suit anyone. And at the same time, nobody. For the first time in a long time, a person unknown to anyone had disappeared in Alberta. And that was more frightening than the discovery itself. McCord took off his hat and said quietly. There are no empty people. So someone really wanted him to become empty. He didn't yet know that this was the first brick in a wall that would take years to break down. Chapter 4: The Room Where the Walls Were Silent. The old farmhouse greeted the investigation team with bated breath. The barn door stood open, but not because of the wind, it seemed to be expecting guests. McCord was the first to cross the threshold. The wood beneath his boot cracked so sharply that Deputy Clyde winced and muttered. This is a great place for a horror movie, Chief. But we're not actors. At least it's all fair, the sheriff muttered. You can't reshoot any take here. The interior smelled of dust, old machine grease, and that special chill that comes with beings where human voices haven't been heard for too long. The light from the lanterns revealed fragments of the past, broken crates, a curled, rusty wire trap, a forgotten cooking pot. But the main thing was yet to come. This way, the forensic scientist said quietly, pointing to the door, propped open with a wooden wedge. Clyde pulled it toward him, it opened without resistance. And it was immediately clear, this part of the farm wasn't as abandoned as the rest. The room was empty. But empty, in the wrong way. Old, abandoned houses aren't so empty. There was no trash, no dust on the floor. As if someone had cleaned up. Quickly. Nervously. On the wall were the even marks left by a lamp. On the floor were the imprints of the legs of a bed, removed as if trying to erase its memory. A torn belt, missing its other half, hung from one of the nails. Someone was working here, the forensic scientist said quietly. Working? Clyde asked. Well, they were doing something. Carefully. Consistently. McCord slowly walked around the room. His palms grew clammy. Not from fear, from that strange feeling when you realize something important was happening here. But the walls chose to remain silent. An old metal bucket stood in the corner. Empty. Clean. Unnaturally clean for a farm. On the table was a scratch resembling the letter C. Accident. Or a signature. Chief, Clyde called, are you seeing what I'm seeing? In the center of the room was a small square of floor, carefully dusted. Not a speck of dust. As if a person had stood here, for a long time. But his movements were so monotonous that he erased the marks with his very steps. McCord crouched down and touched the floor with his fingertips. A chill went straight to his bones. He stood right here, the sheriff said. As if he was searching for an answer. Or waiting for the time to go. While investigators were recording the details, people around town were building their own terrifying theories. At Jack's, one of the regulars insisted. It was a cult. I told you so. I saw people in black jackets at night. To which the bartender lazily remarked. They were teenagers, Fred. In black jackets because it was winter. You're just more afraid of them than the IRS. The laughter in the bar was muffled. Everyone understood, it wasn't teenagers. And not a cult. But someone who knew how to disappear. As McCord left the room, he glanced back once more. Something about it was unsettling. Neither the disorder nor the silence. And the way someone had been trying so hard to erase the past. Chief, what do you think? Clyde asked, nervously fiddling with the notebook. I'll say, McCord sighed, that this man did everything so meticulously, as if he were afraid he'd be judged not on the merits, but on the disorder. Like a pedant. Like a man accustomed to his work appearing complete. He didn't yet know that this thought would become key. That the criminal's handwriting was more important than any evidence. And that sooner or later, the handwriting would lead investigators to where the truth is most dangerously sought, inside one's own doubts. Chapter 5, Flower as Handwriting. The metal table in the lab was so shiny it reflected the lamps like the surface of water. Forensic scientist Kramer stood over it, holding a small bag of the remnants of white powder, and speaking as if he were discussing a cookie recipe rather than potential evidence in a murder case. So, Chief, he shook the bag, sending up a cloud of dust. Flour. Regular stuff. Wheat. Premium grade. Want to smell it? Clyde recoiled in horror, and McCord rolled his eyes. Is she going to tell us who killed the man? Kramer looked thoughtfully at the powder. Honestly. No. But she might tell us who tried to cover it up. He carefully poured some flour onto the glass. The white stain felt oddly homey in this gloomy room, where every square centimeter smelled of death, antiseptic, and the unspoken. See these little lumps? Kramer pointed with the blade of his spatula. This isn't ordinary kitchen flour. It's been sifted. Carefully. Twice. Only bakers do that, or... He paused, as if searching for a more palatable word. Or people with an obsessive love of order. Everything in the farmhouse room was scrubbed, McCord said. Too scrubbed. Exactly. Kramer cried. Someone wanted to erase the marks. And they used what was at hand. Flour dries fresh stains, quickly absorbs moisture, and it was there. On the floor. On the belt. Even in the corner where the bed stood. So he was a neat freak? Clyde asked. Kramer chuckled. More like panicked. A man who's in control starts to lose control when it slips away. And then he grabs the first thing he can find, even if it's a sack of flour. McCord chuckled, though it was a wry smile. So, we're looking for a killer who makes perfect dough. Chief, Kramer said seriously, you're laughing, but many criminals are given away by the most ridiculous things. One was caught by the scent of a rare shoe. Another by the smell of motor oil. And the third? He raised his fingers like a teacher, by flour from a farm that no one has used for 20 years. Clyde chuckled. Excellent. So our suspect is a criminal baker from the past. Well, maybe not a baker, Kramer drawled. But a man who knew how to cover his tracks. And he's done it before. McCord stepped closer, leaning his fists on the table. The street outside rustled with the wind, as if trying to drown out his thoughts. Kramer, if the criminal knew how to hide his tracks, why did he dump the body in a septic tank? That's stupid. Not stupid, he countered. Septic tanks are poor witnesses. They quickly destroy anything they put inside. But he forgot two things. Kramer raised a finger. First, the body was found. And second, he was scared. Too scared to finish the job as usual. Panic ruins handwriting. And in this brokenness lies our strength. McCord considered. Panic is what makes even an intelligent person vulnerable. It removes masks. It reveals the truth. At Jack's, the patrons began arguing. I'm telling you, the killer is some local farmer, declared a fat man with a red nose. Farmers don't use flour, genius, the bartender retorted. When was the last time you saw a cow buy bread? Laughter spread throughout the bar, but everyone understood the truth was still far off. And the more details emerged, the darker the feeling became, as if the very earth here was hiding someone's secrets. When Kramer put the remaining powder back in the bag, he said quietly. You see, Chief, handwriting isn't letters. Handwriting is choices. How a person does his job. How he covers his tracks. How he panics. And flour, that's his signature. McCord nodded. He didn't yet know that this handwriting would lead them to a place where the past was not only not forgotten, but lurked and watched. Chapter 6, Twice Underground. The call came late at night, an unmistakable one. Not a routine call. Not an emergency. A call that awakens not only people, but also their fears. McCord picked up the phone. Someone on the other end was breathing heavily, as if trying to swallow the bitter news before speaking. Chief, it's about Sam's case. Speak. The family has consented. The body can be exhumed. McCord swore quietly, almost with relief. He knew it would take weeks, maybe even months. But he didn't know he'd have to dig more than once. The rain fell steadily. Shallowly. The kind of rain they call sky dust in Alberta. It doesn't pour, it erases. Clyde held an umbrella over the stubborn, cold coffin. Kramer, a camera that seemed afraid to click in such an atmosphere. When the lid was lifted, the air grew heavier. There he is, the pathologist said quietly. Sam, Clyde whispered. If only we knew your name. McCord allowed himself no emotion. He looked at the face, at what remained of it, and tried to imagine who had hidden it so carefully that even death couldn't reveal the truth. Our task, he said, is to collect everything that can be collected. But no one imagined that what was collected would be too little. The lamps in the lab glowed brightly, almost cruelly. The sculptures, the plaster casts, the photographs, the reports, all of it morphed into something between art and despair. Kramer hummed under his breath. Well, Sam, let's put you back together. He's not Sam, Clyde muttered. We don't even know who he is. For now, it's Sam. Otherwise, your brain will break. The forensic scientist carefully smoothed the line of the cheekbones. The irony was that they had tried harder for a dead man than he probably had in life. It's not perfect, he sighed. But it can't get any better. The portrait was strange, a little stubborn, a little tired, completely anonymous. Clyde looked at him and whispered. You were definitely hiding something. And someone is hiding you. A few weeks later, McCord received a new report. Short. Concise. Data inconsistency. Re-exhumation required. He stared at the paper for a long time. Then he clenched his fist, as if trying to hold on to the fleeting thought. Dig again. Clyde asked. Yes. People will hate us. Better they hate us than we hate ourselves. The second time, the coffin was pulled out faster. There was no rain. The wind was sharp, like a reproach. "Why again?" asked one of the workers. "Doubts," McCord answered dryly. "And doubts are worse than any mistake." When they opened the lid, it became clear. Something didn't match. Threads of decomposed tissue. The angle of the damage. The mark of an old fracture that hadn't been noticed the first time. "Either we were mistaken," Kramer said, "or someone really wanted us to be mistaken." In the local cafe, the Broken Horseshoe, the old men were discussing the news. "A little more, and they'll dig up half the cemetery," grumbled one. "Let them dig," chuckled another. "Maybe they'll finally find my uncle too." He vanished as if he'd vanished. "Yeah, along with the debts," added the barista. The laughter was dry, like the clatter of dominoes. But even here, people spoke in whispers, as if someone might be listening. And someone was listening. Always. The second portrait was more accurate. Much more so. So much so that McCord felt uneasy. The face looked at them with a strange reproach. As if it knew the truth was right there, and yet unattainable. Reports were sent to 800 dentists across the country. The answers were the same. "We don't know this person. No records. No matches." As if Sam, the one they'd worked so hard to restore, had never lived. Clyde said quietly. "Twice underground." "What?" "The first time was when he was killed. The second was when he was buried without a name." McCord looked at him and added. "And the third?" "The third? That's when they try to forget him." Chapter 7, The One Who Came Too Late. The night in Alberta was so quiet it seemed the city had stopped breathing. And it was into this silence, dramatically breaking it with its rattling engine, that an old rust-colored pickup truck pulled in. The headlights illuminated a sign. Red Hollow County Police Station. The door slammed, and a man of about 50 climbed out. Tall. Broad-shouldered. But he moved as if every bone were a reminder of an old sin. A dry wind ruffled his gray hair. His cigarette flickered dimly. He took a drag, wincing like a man who hadn't been home in a while, though he still hadn't found a home. When he entered the station, Clyde nearly spilled his coffee. "How can I help you?" He managed to choke out, trying to remember if he'd ever seen this man. The stranger slowly removed his hat. For a moment, he looked as if he was about to leave. But he stayed. "I want to talk about the men found on the farm beyond Horse Creek." "The one from the septic tank?" Clyde frowned. "Name?" "His," the stranger chuckled. "Or mine?" "Let's start with yours." "Lewis. Lewis Harbor." He took a step toward the counter. A heavy step. The step of a man carrying more than his own weight. McCord emerged from the office, buttoning his jacket. His gaze was keen, distrustful, as if he could discern sins from a distance. "What do you want to tell me about the unknown?" he asked bluntly. "About him." Lewis squeezed his hat so tightly the leather creaked. "I might know who he is." The phrase hung in the air. Like the smell of gasoline after a fire, alarming, haunting, foreboding. Clyde looked at the chief. Maybe he knows, or does he know? Lewis didn't answer. He surveyed the area, the old files and folders, the yellowed maps, the lamp crackling softly. As if testing whether he could trust these walls with his secret. "Okay," he said finally. "But hear me out. Even if you don't like it." "I was a long-haul truck driver," he began, sitting down. "I traveled a lot on the roads. I've seen all sorts of things. But one day..." He paused, as if remembering the wound. "One day I picked up a guy. On the highway between Stavropoint and the McLeod River. Late at night. Very late." He took a drag on his cigarette. The smoke rose slowly, like thoughts he was trying to push away. He said his name was Sam. Only. I'm not sure that was his real name. "Why?" McCord asked. "Because he didn't want anyone to know who he was." Clyde leaned forward. "What did he look like?" "He needs a shave," Lewis chuckled. "Tired eyes. But not drunk. You know the kind." Yes. They knew. People running not from the law, but from their past. He said he had something to tell. Someone. Tell what? Clyde asked. The truth. What? Lewis shrugged. He didn't. Just, if I don't, it'll be worse. The sheriff paused. A truth that could make someone feel worse. Usually only those who have too many reasons to remain silent say that. And then? McCord asked. Then. Lewis rubbed his face with his hand. I dropped him off at the fork in the road, near the old farm. He said there was a meeting there. It was dark. Cold. I wanted to wait, but... Did they leave? Yes. And I kept thinking, was it worth leaving him alone? He fell silent. The pause became louder than words. When I heard the news this morning, I realized. Lewis swallowed. I realized that guy could have been him. The one they found. Clyde exhaled slowly. You came after all this time to say this. I was afraid. What? That it was my fault. That I. He slammed his fist against his knee. That I abandoned him. A shadow flickered in the station window. Barely noticeable. As if someone was standing by Lewis's car, checking the license plate, color, make. And then vanished. Clyde looked up. Did you see it? I see everything, McCord replied quietly. And I don't like it. Lewis didn't notice the anxiety. He sat like a man who had been silent for too long, and now couldn't stop. I want to help, he said. If it's not too late. Too late for him, McCord replied. But not for the truth. And at that moment, something clicked. In the air. In the grim logic of the case. In the fate of all three. Lewis left the station, and McCord whispered. Sometimes the one who comes too late, comes just when you expect him. He didn't yet know how true this would turn out to be. Chapter 8, The Farm That Never Quieted. The night was too quiet for a place that concealed so much of the past. As McCord and Clyde approached the old farmhouse, their headlights illuminated a house as if carved out of a forgotten nightmare. Sagging roof, sagging walls, dark windows, perfect eyes for surveillance. It looks like an ordinary abandoned place, Clyde muttered. No, McCord replied. Ordinary places don't wait for us so, tensely. He said it almost in a whisper, but the wind heard and seemed to agree. It howled, catching on the wire of the old fence. The farmhouse looked the same as the day the body was found. But one thing was different, the silence. Then it was broken by workers, noise, and police voices. Now the silence was so thick it seemed the house was holding it inside, like a secret. You know, Clyde said, this silence reminds me of the pause between two hammer blows. And to me, it's the moment between a question and a confession, McCord replied grimly. They stepped inside. The floor creaked, as if in protest. The smell of damp mingled with something else, something musty, old, but familiar. The smell of flour. Can you smell it? Clyde asked. I can, McCord replied. And I don't like where this is leading. They climbed the stairs, which shook with every step. The room where they'd found the evidence of a struggle looked different. Not cleaner. Not dirtier. Just different. As if someone had come after them. Clyde picked up the lantern. The light fell on the floor. It's... Yes, McCord said. New footprints. There were fresh shoe prints on the dusty floor. Not old. Not farm. City. Clean. As if someone had come here not to hide, but to investigate. You think it's the one who... Clyde trailed off. Yes, McCord confirmed. Someone connected to the case. And he came back because he needed to make sure we didn't find too much. The sheriff slowly crouched down and traced the footprints with his finger. These shoes aren't from around here. Neither is Sam, Clyde said. They walked on. In the corner of the room lay an old mattress, the very same one. But someone had turned it over. Why? On the road, not far from the farm, a lone car turned off its engine. A man was sitting inside. He looked at the farm as if he knew every board, every nail. As if he'd once been a part of this place. His hands trembled on the wheel. He whispered. "They're close. Too close." But he didn't come out. He simply waited. Waited for the silence to take its course. McCord found another trace, almost imperceptible. As if someone had drawn something across the wall. He raised the flashlight. And saw a barely visible crack in the plaster. Thin. Vertical. A safe. Clyde suggested. A hiding place, McCord corrected. Or something like that. He pried the crack with a knife. The plaster crumbled, revealing a small depression. Inside, a scrap of cloth and paper. A yellowed sheet of paper. Crumpled. But with the words clearly written. "If I'm gone, tell them the truth." Clyde froze. "Is that Sam's handwriting?" "The strangest thing," McCord said. "Nobody knows what his handwriting was." Headlights flashed through the window. McCord yanked the light closed. "Someone's here." They ran to the window. But the car had already disappeared into the night. As if it had dissolved into the darkness. "Chief." Clyde breathed out. "We were being checked." "Yes. And this farm, it's not silent. It's been trying to tell us something for a long time. We just weren't listening." McCord clutched the crumpled piece of paper in his hand. "He tried to tell the truth," he said. "But to whom? Someone came to this farm at night. Not to hide. And to make sure his secret was still buried." McCord glanced at the empty road and whispered. "But nothing stays buried forever." Chapter 9, Other People's Bones in Their Pockets. McCord's office had been warm, but now it felt icy. An old radiator crackled softly in the corner, as if reminding him that even things here aged faster than people. On the desk was a piece of paper found in a hiding place on the farm. The very same one on which someone had written. "If I'm gone, tell them the truth." McCord looked at the paper as if it were the last piece of evidence before the world collapsed completely. "You know," Clyde said, entering with 2 mugs of coffee, "I have a feeling we're holding not a piece of paper, but someone's abandoned hope." "Or a warning," McCord replied. He took the mug, took a sip, and immediately winced. The coffee was disgusting, like everything they'd been chewing on for the past few weeks. "Chief, there's something strange," Clyde began, nervously flipping through the papers. "Everything about this case is strange. More specifically, the coroner sent an addendum. They added an item found in the pocket of Sam's old jacket to the Sam file." McCord raised an eyebrow. "In the pocket? We checked everything. They found it just now. Between the lining and the fabric. Like someone sewed it, where no one would look." Clyde pulled out a small package. Inside was something whitish, uneven, resembling a splinter. McCord frowned. "Is that a bone?" "Looks like it." Yes, inside the package was a small bone fragment, not human, not like a normal one. But it was definitely keeping someone's secret. Clyde continued. "The analysis showed that this bone didn't belong to Sam." "Excellent," McCord chuckled. "Now we have a corpse with someone else's bones in its pockets. And also..." Clyde hesitated. "The place where this bone was broken is an old, long-healed fracture. So, was it carried around for a long time?" "A long time." McCord suddenly stood up. He had been pacing the office like a caged animal. "So Sam, or whatever his name was carrying someone else's bone in his pocket." Clyde added. "Or someone put it there. So we could find it." McCord tapped his fingers on the table. "This bone must be a marker. Some kind of sign. Like, look here. Or don't look here. They like that kind of game." He opened the coroner's report. There were notes. Bone age, approximately several decades old. Doesn't match the age of the deceased. Heavy wear marks. Old tool marks, possibly crude surgery. Clyde rubbed the back of his head. "To be honest, I feel like we're holding a piece of someone else's life that someone tried to hide." "Yes," McCord said. "And hid it in the dead man's pocket. Like the most secure safe." The dead are the perfect keepers of secrets, Clyde. In a small workshop outside the city, a man in an apron slowly sharpened a knife. Not a kitchen knife, a woodworking knife. The wood smelled of shavings, flour, and dust. Old things hung on the wall. A yellowed calendar. A faded photograph. And a small bag with something heavy inside. He glanced at the window. There, in the distance, the wind blew dust across the road. They found a bone, he told himself. Damn them. He put the knife down on the table, pulled out the pouch, and emptied its contents. Old, smooth bone fragments fell onto the table. Similar. The same. He sighed. Okay. Time to go. He picked up one fragment, almost identical to the one in McCord's hands. And whispered. You've talked too much, Sam. Too much. Chief. Clyde looked at the papers. Do you realize what this changes? Everything, McCord said. If this bone is evidence of an old crime, then Sam is connected to it. Or was a witness. Or wanted to tell. And paid for it. He sat up, resting his elbows on his knees, and looked at the piece of paper he'd found in the farmhouse wall. If I'm gone, tell them the truth. Maybe he was trying to leave a trace for us. Or give someone a signal, Clyde said. Those who knew him. Who knew him? That, Chief, is the biggest question. McCord closed his eyes for a second. He tilted his head. He took a deep breath. A foreign bone in a dead man's pocket, he said. That's not just evidence. It's an indictment. To whom? To everyone who didn't want to hear the truth. And what's the truth? The one that vanished along with its bearer. He looked up. Our next stop is someone who knows what these bones mean. Because someone slipped us a fragment of a story that we're reading too late. Chapter 10, A Visitor from the Past. The snow was falling so thickly it seemed as if winter itself was trying to hide its tracks. The clicking of the windshield wipers barely penetrated the uneasy silence as McCord's patrol car climbed the old forest road. Clyde was nervous. It was evident in the way he fiddled with his belt buckle, as if it might hint at what lay ahead. Chief, why are we going to see him at night? Because a man like that only appears at night, Clyde. During the day, he's just a ghost. And at night? At night, he's a memory. Clyde swallowed. McCord parked in front of a ramshackle house whose license plate wasn't even visible. Only a dim light in the window indicated that someone was still living inside. Or, existed. A short old man opened the door. His face was wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and alert, like those of a man accustomed to spotting danger before anyone else. Sheriff, he said in a hoarse voice. You've been gone a long time. Owen, McCord nodded. We need to talk. You always want to talk when it would be better to remain silent. Owen Nearly, a former farmer, a former hunter, a former witness. Except for one thing, he had never been a former witness. He remembered. And he only told when he felt it was time. He let them in, closing the door so quietly, as if locking secrets behind them. What brings you here? Owen asked, sinking into the old chair, which creaked as if alive. Bone, McCord said without preamble. The old man froze. His fingers, thin and bony, seemed to have turned to stone. A bone, in the pocket of that guy they found in the septic tank. You know about him. News travels faster than dogs in small towns, Sheriff. He looked at McCord with a long, unpleasantly precise gaze. Show me. McCord pulled out a bag. Owen took it between two fingers, like poison. Oh, my, he whispered. I thought they burned them all. Bones. No, Sheriff. Stories. He placed the bag on the table. It's not just a bone. It's a mark. Old. Dirty. And, unfortunately, very tenacious. Clyde couldn't resist. Mr. Nearly, do you know whose bone this is? I know, the old man replied calmly. The silence in the room grew thick, like a wool blanket. McCord leaned forward slightly. Go on. It belonged to a man named Garrett Devley. Who is that? Someone who got into something he shouldn't have too early. And what happened to him? Owen looked out the window, as if it were a movie only he could see. Nobody ever found him either, Sheriff. You mean? Yes. He disappeared. Years ago. And his bone was in Sam's possession. Exactly. McCord sighed. So now we have two missing people, connected by a single bone. You should change that, Owen said hoarsely. Not two missing people. How so? Two who weren't allowed to tell the truth. Clyde rubbed his face with his palms. God hasn't touched this case in a long time, the old man chuckled. People worked here. Very bad people. Owen stood up, pulled an old box from the shelf, and placed it in front of them. I was expecting someone to come for this. Sooner or later. What's in there? Clyde asked. Owen flipped open the lid. Inside were old newspaper clippings. Photographs of people who had disappeared over the years. And a map, decayed to the point of holes, with strange markings near the farm where Sam was found. Garrett. Sam. And not just them, Owen said. This isn't just one crime, Sheriff. What? It's an entire road. A road to where? To where people disappear. And where silence is worth more than life. Clyde leafed through the clippings, growing paler with each glance. Chief, these are dozens of people. Yes, McCord replied. And we only have one bone. And one corpse. Which, it seems, wasn't the main one. Then who's the main one? The one who started all this. And when McCord looked up, Owen was already looking at him as if he knew the answer. As if he were that very guest from the past, finally returning to his story. Sheriff, the old man said quietly. You have to understand the main thing. The one who put that bone in Sam's pocket, he's still here. Close by. And he's watching you. Clyde swallowed hard. So, he knows we found all this. Oh, Clyde, Owen smiled. He knows more about you than you know yourself. Chapter 11, the house where the walls heard too much. The sound of his boots on the ice crust sounded as if the earth itself was trying to warn. Don't enter. But McCord was already walking down the path leading to Owen's house, with the heavy tread of a man who understands the answers are closer than they seemed, and that only makes them more terrifying. Clyde trailed behind, glancing back every 5 seconds. The snow crunched nervously under his steps, as if complaining about life as much as he did. Chief. He finally muttered. What if we're wasting our time going back to him? We never waste our time where the silence is too loud. Sounds like a preacher, not a house. Sometimes the walls speak louder than the people, McCord replied. And he didn't yet know how right he was. Owen greeted them in silence. Not surprised, not wary, more like a man who'd been expecting guests for a long time but hoped they wouldn't come. Do you need something again? He asked wearily. We need everything, McCord said curtly. The house smelled of wet wood, old tobacco, and something else. Like time had spilled. Clyde coughed, wiping his glasses. You have, sounds in here. It's a house, Owen chuckled. An old house always talks. Yeah, only now it's like it's screaming, Clyde muttered. Owen motioned with his gaze for them to go into the room where the box stood. McCord felt the air here thicker than it should be. As if other people's words were suspended in it. You don't just know who Garrett is, the sheriff began. Yes. And not just knowing Sam. Yes. Then tell me, why did he end up with that bone? Owen sat down. Heavily. That's how people sit when they're about to confess, but they don't know if they should. Because I gave it to Sam, he said finally. Clyde choked. McCord froze. You, what? I gave him the bone. Because he was looking for answers. And I wanted him to find them faster. Are you trying to play the prophet? McCord hissed. I decided to play the truth, Sheriff. And truth is rarely safe. The old man ran his hand across the table, leaving a trace in the fine dust. Garrett came to me years ago. He said there was something strange going on at the farm. That someone was using it as a home, a place best left untouched. So you checked. I checked. And found something I shouldn't have. He looked up. Then Garrett disappeared. Clyde muttered. And you didn't do anything. I told the sheriff at the time. He said Garrett probably left. That's all. That's all I could do then. And when Sam showed up, the old man continued. He was asking questions too. He also sensed that something was wrong in town. But he was more persistent. Braver. Or stupider, decide for yourself. McCord gritted his teeth. You knew it was dangerous. Yes. And you still gave him the evidence. Yes. Silence fell between them like an axe. I thought he'd go to the police, not go in there alone, Owen whispered. He was young, and believed the truth would open doors. And he died because of it. I know. Owen's fingers trembled. He quickly put his hands under the table. The old wall to the right creaked, as if someone had run a hand over it. Clyde shuddered again. Is this home again? It's home, McCord said. But now he talks more than usual. Owen rose slowly, walked over to the wall, and touched it with his fingers. There was a map hanging here, he said quietly. I took it down after Garrett disappeared. Why? Because I didn't want to remember. McCord walked closer. There were small dents on the wall from the thumbtacks. And barely noticeable scratches. You swear you didn't hide anything? I did. How much? Enough to live with shame, but not enough to live with peace. So you were afraid to speak? Afraid. And now? Now I'm afraid to remain silent. As they left, the wind pushed against the old wall, and it groaned softly. As if trying to hold them back. Or, conversely, to drive them away. McCord stopped at the threshold and turned to Owen. If you know more than you're saying. Sheriff, the old man interrupted. I know less than I should. But more than I want to. And when the door closed, Clyde said quietly. Chief. What? And if the walls really did hear too much? Then it's time we figured out who they were planning to tell all this to. Chapter 12, Shadows of Those Gone Too Soon. Evening descended on the town so quickly, as if someone had turned off the lights. The streetlights flickered, either from the wind or from the tension in the wires, which strangely matched the tension in the air. McCord walked toward the station, feeling his fingers growing cold inside his gloves. Not from the cold, but from the thought that someone had started the game first, and now the sheriff was just chasing a shadow. Clyde, barely keeping up with him, shivered. Chief. You look like you just saw the heating bill. Worse, Clyde. We'll have to re-examine the whole case. But we've been doing this all week. I said, from scratch. And it sounded so sarcastically that even Clyde, who had caught the sarcasm, didn't dare respond. A bit too much, actually. The silence was like a warning sign, something's wrong here. The hallway light flickered before steadying, like a man taking a deep breath before an important conversation. On McCord's desk lay all the case materials. Photographs of the body's discovery site. Old newspaper clippings. Reports. And, separately, the bag containing the very bone. He sat down, feeling the chair beneath him sway slightly, as if it, too, were nervous. Chief. Clyde carefully placed 2 mugs on the table. Coffee. I made one stronger than the world around me. Thank you. Is that the stronger one? I hope so. Clyde sank into the next chair. So what now? Now, let's look at those who disappeared earlier. McCord laid out the list in front of him. Names. Photographs. Addresses. Circumstances of disappearance. All the people disappeared at different times. Different ages. Different professions. No mutual acquaintances. It's a mess. Clyde groaned. It's a pattern masquerading as a mess, the sheriff corrected. Both Sam and Garrett, they just happened to be closest to the center. McCord pointed at the map. Look. I'm looking, Chief. And I don't understand anything. Exactly. He drew a line between the disappearance sites. They're going in a circle. In what circle? The radius is about a couple of kilometers. The center is an old farm. Clyde paled noticeably. That means. Yes. Someone used the farm as a reference point. But why? So all the disappearances would appear unconnected. Someone passed by the window on the street. A shadow, quick, sharp. McCord looked up reflexively. No one. You saw it too? Clyde whispered. Yes. And we're not alone, Clyde. Never have been. McCord turned the photographs over. Look here. Some of the pictures show the faces of people who disappeared more than 10 years ago. Others are very recent, taken while they were still alive. But many had one thing in common. They were all last seen near the road leading to the farm. Chief. Clyde managed to say. This isn't a coincidence anymore. This is already a trace. What are we going to do? Clyde asked. We'll find whoever's behind this. What if he already knows we're looking for him? He knows. He knew before we even started. Clyde winced. Chief. What? And if those shadows, the old-timers talk about, aren't just legends? You mean the men without a birthday? Well, yes. Clyde, McCord sighed. Superstitions are just superstitions. But the farm is old. It could have been, someone's territory before us. It was. And maybe it still is. As they were about to close the files, the shadow outside the window flickered again. Closer this time. Longer. As if someone was standing and watching. Clyde almost screamed. Chief. I see it. Is it him? It's someone who wants us to think exactly that way. McCord stood up and went to the window. But the street was empty. Only the snow, falling diagonally, seemed to obscure someone's footsteps. The sheriff said quietly. The shadows of those who left too soon never disappear. They simply wait for someone to find a bone again that will make the past speak. Chapter 13, The One Who Watched in the Dark. The snowfall stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Usually, that was a relief, but not today. Today, the silence wasn't a blessing, but a threat. Silence is when someone can get closer without revealing their steps. Clyde nervously shifted his mug from one place to another. Chief. I swear, that shadow really was standing under the window. I know. Something creaked outside again. Not a tree. Not the wind. Too rhythmic. Too human. McCord approached the door. Chief, where are you going? To where the silent answers cease. He opened the door. But it was worse than if someone had been standing there. The snow was flattened. Fresh tracks. But, the strangest thing, they couldn't see where they'd come from. Only where they'd left. As if the shadow had been there for a long time. And vanished when it realized it had been noticed. Clyde shuffled closer. Chief, this isn't normal. This is surveillance. Surveillance. Yes. He's testing us. Checking how close we are. Clyde shuddered. And what did he see? That we were continuing forward. But not here. McCord ran his hand over the fresh snow. See these lines? What lines? From the edge of the window to the door. Well, yes. He was positioned so he could see us. So he could see us reading the materials. Clyde looked around, confused. Chief, are you saying he knows we found out about the disappearance ring? He knows everything, Clyde. And he's known it for a long time. But how? Because he lives here. In the city. No. McCord straightened up. He lives among people. What does that mean? It means he leaves no trace. He just moves from life to life. Like a whisper. Like a hunch. Like fear. The snow on the roof of the station quietly fell, as if someone had walked across it. Clyde looked up sharply. Is that a bird? No. Then what? The same thing that was under the window. Knock. Another. A third. But this time, from above. McCord said. They don't get into the station through the roof. And if it is. Not if. It's him. Clyde followed him like a shadow following his master, though he was afraid to make every step creak. The attic was dark, smelling of old wood and damp. The flashlight beam cut the space like a knife. And in the midst of this darkness lay a snowdrift. A fresh stain. As if someone had just stepped on it. "Chief," Clyde whispered. "He was here." "Yes. But why?" "To look down on us from above. It sounds unpleasant. That's putting it mildly." There was a scratch on the wooden beam, long, faint, but recognizable. The same letter that had been in the room at the farm. S. Clyde froze. "Chief, it's the same hand." "But, how?" "He was here. Before us. But this is the station. So he's not afraid of the police." Clyde rubbed his temples. "Chief, he's not human anymore." "He's human." "Who then?" "Someone who can live in the dark the way others live in the light." As they were about to go down, something fell to the floor, a soft pop, like paper. McCord picked it up. A white scrap of paper. On it, written in one sentence. "You're moving in the right direction. But in the wrong direction." No signature. Only the same letter, C, in the corner. Clyde whispered. "Chief, he's playing us." "Yes. So what now?" "Now we're playing too." McCord turned off the flashlight. The darkness answered him with silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence of someone watching from the darkness and waiting for them to take the next step. Chapter 14, A Map That Shouldn't Exist. The cold air in the archive room smelled of old paper and something else, something unsettling, as if the dust itself was trying to tell its own version of events. Laura held the battered cardboard box in her hands. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but rather from the strange premonition that sometimes comes to those who peer too long into the shadows. The lid gave way with a dry pop. And the first thing she saw was the map. Yellowed, with faded lines. No name. No legend. No author. Just a network of roads, half of which had long since disappeared from any official maps. "Well," Laura muttered, "if they ask me later why I went where I shouldn't have, I'll say, because someone left the map and signed." People get sued for that kind of thing. Maps, you know, are weapons of mass destruction for the nerves. She unfolded the sheet completely, and the world seemed to freeze. Faint, nearly erased pencil marks were visible on the bottom margin of the card. And among them, one, written in a man's firm hand. "Don't go there unless you're ready to hear the truth." Owen sat on the veranda outside his house, staring at the horizon. It seemed he hadn't seen reality in a long time, only its reflection in his own memories. He held a mug of iced tea in his hands. God knows how long it had been in his fingers. The old man sighed and whispered. "Found it, damn it. Found it." The neighbor's cat passed by, purring. The only witness to his conversation with himself. Owen stroked the cat's head. Why do they need all this? Why do people always think the truth is treasure? Truth is the tax office. No one wants to see it, but everyone encounters it sooner or later. She returned to the police station. The silence of the night shift seemed to weigh down the walls. A map lay on the desk, and the desk lamp only revealed its faint lines from the darkness. "Why no name?" Laura muttered. Her fingers found a mark, a small cross near the old farm where the body was found. But nearby were 3 more dots. 3 places that hadn't appeared in any reports. And next to them, letters. Barely visible, but still legible. SG. MK. OW. 3 sketches of initials. And the last one, all too familiar. Laura clenched her teeth. Her clammy palms betrayed all her tension. Owen Wallace. The initials of an old man who swore he'd only witnessed part of the events. That he'd been in passing. That he'd never known Sam. Or did he? She asked herself quietly. The door lock clicked, almost inaudibly. Someone entered. "You're working a bit late, detective," said a familiar, slightly hoarse voice. Laura turned slowly. Owen stood at the entrance. He wore an old jacket that seemed older than the city itself. His face was calm, tired, as if he'd finally decided to stop running. "I saw your car," he said. "I knew you'd break down and go back into the archives. So you knew I'd find it?" Laura nodded at the map. Owen leaned against the wall. His gaze slid across the table. That map wasn't supposed to be seen again. By anyone. Who drew it? The old man smiled, with a bitterness that smelled of stale tobacco and bad decisions. "We. A group of 4. We thought we were doing a good deed. We thought we were protecting the city. And then everyone realized that maps, always lead the wrong way. Did you know Sam?" He was silent for a long moment. And that moment stretched like an elastic band, ready to snap. "I knew Sam. Very well. Too well. Owen looked away. "He was one of us. So you knew his death wasn't an accident?" Laura's voice held a cold steely edge. "I knew it shouldn't have happened," Owen replied quietly. "But we lost control of what we started. Someone went beyond the agreement, and Sam paid." Laura looked down at the map. On 3 dots. On the cross by the farm. On the initials. The truth was closer than she thought. And more dangerous than she imagined. "Tell me everything," she said. Owen looked her straight in the eyes. "Are you sure? Sometimes the truth disappears not because someone wants to hide it, but because the people who know it can't bear its weight." Chapter 15, The 4 Who Were. The door closed behind Owen with a soft click, as if the air itself had decided, whatever happened next, there was no turning back. Laura turned on the recorder. The lamp's shadow on the wall trembled like a nervous witness. "Let's begin," she said. "You claim there were 4 of you. And what, are the others alive?" Owen chuckled softly. "Alive? It's like a curse. At least the dead don't need paperwork, you know." "Who are those 3? Laura asked. The old man ran his hand over his face, as if peeling back a mask he'd lain in for years. "Me, Sam." He hesitated. "And 2 whose names you should have heard long ago. But you didn't. That's how it sometimes is, people live among us, and we don't notice them until they explode." He drew an invisible square on the table with his finger. "Miles Garrett. Dixon Riley. And Sam Hope. What were you doing?" Owen laughed quietly, the sound of it sounded like the creaking of old floorboards. "Uneven, unpleasant. We were doing stupid things. We thought we could help the patrol with what they weren't getting done. Surveillance, tailing, night patrols, the dirty little jobs no one wanted to write about in their reports. We were, what's the fashionable phrase these days? The city's willing eyes." He smiled bitterly. "Our eyes worked. Our heads, not so much." Across town, in a small trailer on the edge of an old highway, a man in a dark jacket looked at the photographs spread out on the table. 4 faces. 1 crossed out. Sam. The remaining 3 were untouched. He carefully folded the photos, tucked them into the envelope, and glanced at the window. A gust of wind fluttered the glass, as if someone, or something, was already standing outside. "When did it all start?" Laura asked. "Oh." Owen closed his eyes. "In the late 70s. Petty thefts, missing livestock, overnight visitors on the farms. It seemed trivial then, but we knew someone was using these places for meetings." He leaned forward. "And we found a way to remain unnoticed. A map. That very one. A sketch where we noted what we saw, who we spotted, which routes converged. We became too engrossed." "Where did the other 3 go?" Laura asked. "Sam disappeared. Miles ran. Dixon." He shrugged. "He lives nearby. But he pretends the past never happened. And all 3 of them are still here. In Alberta." Owen nodded. Slowly. Heavily. Like a man who had carried other people's secrets for years and was now finally speaking them out loud. Laura picked up the map and unfolded it again. Her fingers slid to the first 2 marks, the ones near the farm. These dots. She whispered. Was this where Miles and Dixon lived? Exactly, Owen said. And I'm afraid they both realize you've started digging. He glanced at the office door. People like that can't keep quiet for long. You think they might interfere? Laura looked up. Owen didn't have time to answer. The doorknob turned slowly. Without a knock. Without warning. A man in a dark jacket entered the office, exactly the same one he'd seen flashing by the trailer on the side of the highway. Laura almost dropped the map. Owen turned pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. Dixon. He whispered. The man closed the door behind him. A calm, unnatural, and icy, filled the air. We need to talk, he said. All 3 of us. And there was no anger or fear on his face. Only the confidence of a man who had waited too long for his moment. Chapter 16, When 3 Are Silent. The silence in the office was so thick it felt like the air had turned to cotton wool. Laura felt something tighten inside her, not fear, but the instinct of a person who understands that the truth is about to be revealed, a truth that will make the walls crack. Dixon Riley stood by the door, leaning his shoulder against the frame. He wore a dark jacket, and his face bore the expression of a man who had long ago forgotten how to be surprised. I never thought they'd bring us together again, he said. And at the police station, no less. Ironic, we've been running from him our whole lives. Owen rose heavily from his chair. Dixon. You shouldn't have come here. You're wrong, man. You should have. Because Laura found the map. And the map is a ticket to a past none of us want to revisit. Laura looked at them both. The old man with eyes full of regret. And the other, silent, angular, dangerously calm. Where's Miles? She asked. Dixon grinned, but without relish. Miles. Oh, he's somewhere nearby. He's always somewhere nearby when trouble is in the air. That's the only thing he could consistently do, sense trouble an hour before it happened. So, he's in town. Laura clarified. To be precise, he's never left, Dixon replied. He's just learned to be invisible. The words hung in the air. Too much had been said. And even more was left unsaid. The old phone on the dusty table in the trailer rang once. Then again. Miles Garrett picked it up, slowly. Found it? He asked in a hoarse, even voice. Pause. Ringing. Long. Okay. I'll be there. He hung up, opened his desk drawer, and pulled out an envelope, an old, crumpled envelope, sealed years ago. It read. Open only if everything collapses. Miles sighed, stuffed the envelope in his pocket, and walked outside. The trailer creaked, as if it, too, understood, something that should have remained buried deep underground was returning. Dixon, Laura said, if you're here, it means you have something to say. He walked slowly to the desk. His steps were quiet, like those of a man accustomed to the streets at night. I want you to understand one thing, detective. We weren't bandits. We weren't heroes. We were, he chuckled, enthusiasts who should have been sitting at home watching TV instead of playing law enforcement. But someone crossed the line, Laura said. Dixon held his breath for a second. Yes. Someone did. But not one of us 3. Sam, he was too gentle, but honest. Owen, too upstanding to do anything terrible. And I, he shrugged. I'm stupid, but not evil. Laura frowned. Then who? Owen slowly sank back into his chair. We don't know. But we know Sam was going to say something important the day before he disappeared. Something concerning the entire map. Dixon opened his mouth to continue, but was interrupted by the sound of a siren in the precinct parking lot. Sharp. Shrill. Nervous. Laura rushed to the window and saw a lone car parked right in front of the entrance. The car door swung open. A figure in a long coat stepped out, holding something in his hand. A package. White, thick. Owen gripped the elbow of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. It's Miles, he whispered. Only he comes so, quietly, as if he's delivering a death sentence. Dixon exhaled. Well, that's it. There are 4 of us. The figure in the coat approached the station door and stopped right under the lamp. The light fell on his face. Miles. And he held the same envelope with the inscription. Open only if everything collapses. He walked inside. Without saying a word. He placed the envelope on the table in front of Laura. Open it, he said evenly. Since you found the map, now you must know what we've been hiding all these years. Laura slowly reached for the envelope. And felt the office grow colder. Chapter 17, An Envelope from the Past. The envelope lay on the table, like a small but all too heavy door into the past. The thick paper crunched under Laura's fingers. It was covered in faded ink, the letters uneven, as if they had been written hastily or in the dark. Owen and Dixon stood nearby. Miles, opposite, his hands in his pockets, his face stony. As if he already knew what was inside and didn't want to relive what had once nearly broken him. Laura inhaled. The dry air of the office smelled of old dust and something else, anticipation. Open it, Miles repeated. His voice was even, almost emotionless, but deep down, there was a tension, like the rumble of a distant train in the stillness of the night. Laura tore the edge of the envelope. Inside were several sheets of paper, held together by a rusty paperclip, a small map with red dots, and a note torn from a notebook. Sam's handwriting. Uneven. Tired. The handwriting of a man who wrote for himself, not for anyone else. She began to read aloud. If something happens, it means I've found too many. And none of them are to blame. They're afraid, but not angry. But the ones we were looking for, they changed their route. They got closer. Too close. Owen clenched his fists. Dixon cursed quietly under his breath. Laura continued. I think they're using old farms as checkpoints. Places where they won't be found. I found a third one. And someone saw me there. I think. I've already been added to the list of those who are unnecessary. She looked up. Who is he talking about? Dixon turned to the window. There was this guy. He muttered. We thought he was just a weird tramp back then. But Sam saw him a few times. He said he had a look like a man who's already said goodbye to everything alive, but his body has forgotten to lie down. Owen lowered his head. We laughed. But we should have listened. An old car pulled to a quiet, careful stop in the parking lot in front of the station. The interior shook, as if the engine was hanging on by a thread. The man inside ran his fingers along the steering wheel. There was a scar on his palm, an old, jagged one. He looked at the glowing windows of the station and said quietly. It's time. They'll find out anyway. Better to tell it yourself. The car door opened. The silhouette stepped out, disappearing into the night. Laura spread Sam's small map out on the table. On it, there's a line intersecting with one of the dots on the large one found in the archive. This, Laura said, is the third farm. Dixon nodded. We never got there. Sam said he'd check it out himself, it wouldn't do for the 3 of us to show up. Yeah. He chuckled. Great idea, Sam. One against who knows who. He didn't come back, Owen said quietly. The words fell into the silence like a stone in a well. Miles stepped closer. At this farm, we were supposed to find the people who were robbing warehouses, pitting farmers against each other, and holding late-night meetings in underground barns. We thought we'd catch the thieves. He looked at Laura, and for the first time, something akin to fear appeared in his eyes. But we caught something else. Laura lifted the last page from the envelope. On it was a short phrase, written hastily, as if at the last moment. If they find me, the map is useless. The real truth is underground. Where the second door is. Laura frowned. What do you mean, second door? Owen opened his mouth to answer, but didn't have time. There was a knock on the office door. Quietly. Twice. All 3 men turned at once. Laura felt her stomach clench, the way it does when something that has stood outside the light for too long is about to enter a room. She walked to the door and opened it. And saw a man in farm work clothes standing there. A familiar face. Too familiar. He spoke hoarsely. You were looking for me. Laura slowly bowed her head. Identify yourself. He sighed. I was there that night. At the farm. Sam. He talked to me. He understood something. Something that couldn't be left alive. Owen exhaled. Oh, my God, it's Elijah Moore. Dixon paled. Miles took a step back. Elijah looked at them all in turn, calm, tired. It's time for you to hear what happened that night, the way I saw it. And he stepped into the office. Chapter 18, The night it all came falling apart. The night it all came crashing down began quieter than usual. There was no thunder, no screams, no wind, not even the sound of dogs in the town of Alberta, as if the whole world held its breath, so no one would disturb the most important mistakes of human life. Elijah stood in his office, leaning against the doorframe as if it were the only piece of furniture he trusted. The lamplight caught his face, tired, chewed by time, with that, nothing surprises me anymore, look. I'll start with the simplest thing, he said. Sam didn't come there by accident. Miles frowned. He told us he noticed tracks. Where did you even? Because I showed him the way, Elijah interrupted. He was the only one who didn't think I was the town bogeyman. The only one who listened, not laughed. Dixon coughed, as if choking on his own memories. Elijah began speaking slowly. His voice was even, but there was something fragile about it, like a rusty chain about to snap. The night was clear. The moon was like a lantern. Sam came to check the barn. I walked behind him, didn't want him to know I was worried. Funny, huh? He chuckled. Worried about a guy who was already so fearless. Owen said quietly. He always did. An unlicensed hero. Elijah looked at him but didn't argue. We approached the farm. All 3 doors were closed. But. He squinted, as if he was seeing the scene again. The second one. It wasn't locked. Just closed. Sam said, a bad sign. Or a very good one. Damn philosophical, Dixon muttered. He entered first, Elijah continued. And then we heard footsteps. Not fast. Slow. Human. But you know, when a person isn't sure they want to be seen. Laura felt a chill run down her spine. Elijah spoke not as an eyewitness, but as someone who was still there. This stranger. Elijah frowned. He wasn't trying to attack. On the contrary, Sam spoke to him calmly. Like an animal that might scare you if you wave your hand too sharply. He looked lost. He was wearing an old jacket and... He paused. So? Laura asked. And, he had a blank look. Not angry, not threatening. Just, a man who no longer remembers how to live in his own body. For a few seconds, no one moved in the room. Did Sam help him? Owen asked quietly. I wanted to, Elijah replied. He came closer and asked, is someone looking for you? And he kept repeating the same thing. One word. Miles stepped forward. What? Elijah looked up. I made it. The silence grew thick. Laura repeated, almost in a whisper. I made it, what? I don't know, Elijah shrugged. Sam didn't understand either. He asked him to sit down, said he wouldn't give anyone away. But then. He clenched his fists. Then others came to the farm. Miles suddenly tensed. What others? 2. They knew we were there. They were probably watching. Sam told me to hide. Don't be a hero, he said. Well, yeah, Elijah chuckled, the first and last time I listened to him. What did they want? Dixon asked. Elijah shook his head. I don't know. But they were sure the stranger was theirs. Not as a person. As a find. A leak. I heard one of them say, he doesn't remember anyway. Let's just take him and leave. Laura felt alarm rising. What happened next? Elijah closed his eyes, as if gathering his thoughts. Sam tried to stop them with words. To say that the man wasn't a thing, not a tool. that they needed to call the police. But one of the men was hot-blooded. Too nervous. He didn't want anyone to know what was happening on the farms. A struggle broke out, but not a fight. Just chaos. People were pushing, talking, someone was trying to get the stranger out. He opened his eyes. Then I heard a scream. Not pain. But surprise. Sam only screamed like that when he realized he'd misjudged a person. And? Owen asked hoarsely. Then the door slammed. Then silence. I was afraid to go out. Sam would have said I was a coward. But I heard footsteps. They were heading toward the road. Quickly. And when I came out, there was no one there. Dixon swallowed. No body. No trace. Elijah shook his head. Only the second door, which Sam tried to open but didn't have time. Laura looked at the map. It showed the same third farm. Nearby was the mark Sam had made, long before the incident. If they find me, the map is useless. The real truth is underground. Where the second door is. She felt her heart thud in her chest. So, Laura said slowly, everything that happened next was the work of those two. And Sam found himself at the center of a story that wasn't his. A story he realized too late. Elijah answered quietly. Yes. He simply turned out to be the wrong person who came to help the wrong people on the wrong night. Laura closed the envelope. She knew there was no turning back. Chapter 19, The Price of the Map. The rain began unexpectedly, as if the sky had decided to wash away everything it could no longer tolerate from the city of Alberta. Laura stood by the window of the old property and watched the drops drumming on the tin roofs of the cars. In the room behind her, the three men were silent, each of them knew the most important thing was about to happen. The map lay on the table. Old, tattered, with Sam's greasy notes. The very one he'd treasured as if it weren't a farmstead map, but the key to his own salvation. And perhaps it was. Let's do it this way, Laura said, without unnecessary gestures or heroics. We all know that this map isn't just a route. It's the reason. Dixon looked away first. His shoulders slumped slightly, as if he realized the moment he dreaded for decades had finally arrived. Elijah stood straight, but his hands were shaking. That was always his trait. He could remain silent, he could avoid the subject, but his palms told the whole story. Miles, the only one who looked calm. Too calm. Laura noted this, like an investigator notes an inconsistency in an alibi. Miles said quietly. A map is just paper. People assign meaning to it. People, Laura chuckled, or you. He said nothing. And that, in essence, said it all. Laura opened the envelope, the very one that held Sam's unfinished journal. The pages were scribbled with pencil, as if he'd written in a hurry. She read aloud. If they find out I saw the second farm, the map will cease to be just a map. It will become evidence. Of what happened there. Of what they were hiding. Miles clenched his jaw. Elijah suddenly spoke, quietly, as if confessing something to a priest, not a woman he trusted. I saw the map before anyone else. Even before Sam. Accidentally. At the time, I thought they were some kind of markings the old farm owner made. You know, where the wire was buried, where the bulls broke through the fence. Dixon chuckled hollowly. At least someone had a normal life. Where the only problem was wire. Elijah continued. And then I saw crosses on the map. Not note crosses. Crosses that you don't put out of boredom. He swallowed. Sam found the map at my house. I didn't hide it, I just didn't understand what it meant. And when he saw it, he immediately said, these aren't just farms. This is a route. Or a list of places where something was hidden. Laura nodded. And Sam was right. Miles took a step toward the table and slowly, carefully, as if the map might bite, poked his finger at one of the crosses. You see a threat here, he said. And I see a risk. A risk that our lives will go to hell if the truth comes out. Miles, Laura said, Sam is dead. And if we want to close his case. He looked up at her, calm, cold, measured. Those same eyes in which the truth was worse than a lie. Laura," he said. Sam didn't die because of the map. He died because of his essence. He couldn't keep silent. Silence fell into the room like a sack of sand. Elijah whispered. "You mean?" "Yes," Miles answered calmly. He dangled a line where no ordinary man should have dipped. He tried to save someone who couldn't be saved. And he came into conflict with people who shouldn't have been provoked. Laura felt something inside her tighten, a combination of horror, understanding, and anger. "And you knew?" she asked. "Yes," Miles replied. "But if I'd told you then," he shook his head, "the city would have ceased to exist." Laura snorted. "And so it remains. Along with the secret that took Sam's life." Miles looked straight into her eyes. "You want the truth? Good. The truth is, sometimes a city isn't just streets and houses. It's people's fears. And if they're destroyed, places cease to be places, and people cease to be people." Dixon asked quietly. "So what are we doing now?" Laura answered first. "Right now, we're deciding what's more important, the truth or survival." The map lay on the table. Thin, old, unremarkable. But it was the map that divided their lives into before and after. And Laura understood. The price of truth is always blood. The only question is whose. Chapter 20, Where Roads End. Night fell on Albert like the lid of an old chest, quietly, heavily, with no way to open it. Laura walked along the narrow road that led to the third farm, the one marked on Sam's map with a thick, haunting cross. The lantern in her hand flickered its light across the wet ground. The air smelled of wet wood and something else, something ancient, forgotten, like a memory you try to forget. Behind them, the three male shadows walked silently. Each was afraid to utter an unnecessary word. For now they were approaching where, by their mutual, silent agreement, the past should remain. But the past is a stubborn thing. It doesn't like to stay where it's left. The farm looked even more abandoned than in the stories. An old barn, overgrown with weeds. Dust that doesn't move in the wind because the wind avoids such places. A silence that made Laura's fingers tremble slightly. "This is where it all began," Elijah said, as if relieved. "And this is where it must end." Laura raised the lantern higher. The barn was closed. But the door into the earth, the very second door Sam had written about, was where he'd pointed. An old door, weighed down by a rusty chain and dried earth. A door that definitely shouldn't exist. And which they were about to open. "Okay," Dixon said. "Let's do it, once and for all." They threw off the remaining earth. The chain clanked like shackles. "Miles," Laura said, "you go first. You've spent too much time with this secret to back out now." He didn't argue. On the contrary, he stepped toward the door, as if returning home. When he pulled it toward him, a heavy, wet sound was heard, as if old wood were sighing. A cold smell wafted from within. Not rot. Not damp. A cold, the kind that only comes from places where no human foot has set foot for a long time. Laura shone the flashlight downward. There was a narrow corridor leading to a small underground chamber. "Well," she said, "let's go." The room was small. The walls were bare earth. One lamp, long since burned out. On the floor was a wooden box, empty but for old, yellowed scraps of paper. Miles bent down. His fingers trembled as he picked up one sheet. Laura saw his face turn pale. "Well?" she asked. He handed her the sheet. It bore the seal of a farming cooperative, from the days when the farms belonged to people who had disappeared long before Sam. But most importantly, there were names. 3 names. And Laura knew every one of them. Because they were standing in front of her. Elijah Doyle. Dixon Milton. Miles Harper. 3 names, next to the words. Responsible for site cleanup. Access to basement only if necessary. And a date. An old one. Many years before Sam's disappearance. Too old for the 3 of them to pretend they knew nothing. "So that's why Sam came back here," Laura whispered. "He realized you 3 had been here before you said you were. What did you know about the basement? And that one of you was genuinely afraid he'd find out too much." Dixon clenched his fists. That wasn't true. We were kids. Grown-ups brought us here. They said it was just an old warehouse that needed checking. We didn't understand anything. But then, Elijah added, we realized the place was strange. That it was best not to return here. But Sam, he saw the mark on my copy of the map. And he decided there was more here than we'd told you. Miles was silent. Laura watched closely. And you, she asked. You knew more than anyone. He looked up. I knew that if Sam got to the bottom of it, the city would split in two. And that sometimes the truth is the most destructive weapon. Laura stepped toward him. But you didn't stop him. He chuckled, wearily, almost pityingly. And how can you stop a man who thinks he's saving everyone? Sam was always too bright. And people fear bright people. Or they use them. Or, he exhaled, they break them. When they emerged from the underground room, the night was so dark, as if someone had erased the stars. The farm stood, a monument to what the town preferred to forget. Laura stopped in the road, turned to them, and said, I'll write a report. There won't be names. But there will be the truth. As much as can be borne. They were silent. Each understood, the truth is never complete. Miles said quietly. We did what we had to. Laura replied. No. You did what you could. And they should have, much sooner. She walked to her car. The rain had started to fall again. Rarely. Cold. The three men remained standing on the road, like shadows of the past. And Laura suddenly thought she heard Sam's quiet voice. Truth is a road. But not all roads lead you home. Laura started the engine and, looking in the rearview mirror, said. Sometimes the truth disappears along with those who knew it. But sometimes, it goes further, along the roads we fear to tread.